Popular goaltender and YouTuber Kaskisuo is out of commission with an injury. So what does the Laval Rocket do now?
Jakob Doish, come on down, right?
But wait, there is good news too. Oh, the ink is barely dry on Kaskisuo's brand new one-way, one-year AHL contract, locking him up to remain with the Laval Rocket for the remainder of this season. And the team announces that he is out with an injury. And I'm going to explain to you in a few minutes what that means for Laval at this stage of the season, with the help of a special guest, I might add. But let's first just take a look at the games that the Montreal Canadiens AHL affiliate did play last weekend, including one that saw Kaskisuo between the pipes. I did just say, hey, don't worry, there's good news. So do you want to know what the good news is? Sean Farrell is back from injury. Yes, round of applause for Sean Farrell. He's been out long-term with an injury, so it was very good to see him take the ice, get back into game action. He's a promising young prospect, and every day that he was out of commission with an injury was a day that he wasn't working on moving his game forward, so it's great news that Sean Farrell is back in the lineup. You want some more good news? I've got more good news. The Laval Rocket kicked off their homestand last week with a game against the Hershey Bears. You know, the defending Calder Cup champions, the team that sits at the top of the league, the team that's looking to break and set new records for winning and points in the AHL this season. Yeah, those Hershey Bears. Would you believe the Laval Rocket beat them in a shootout on Wednesday night? They did. Jakob Doish looked fantastic in net on this night. For whatever reason, Laval was able to figure out a way to clog up lanes, to keep Hershey at arm's length. They managed to get them to overtime, managed to get them to the shootout. Doish stood really tall in net during the shootout, and they came out with a 3-2 victory over the best team in the league. Unfortunately, my good news has to end there. Because then the Toronto Marlies came back to town for their two games on Friday night and Saturday afternoon against Laval. And even though when Laval visited Toronto 2 weeks ago, they split that two-game series with one win and one loss, that was not to be the case this time around. In fact, these were two really ugly games for the Rocket. They lost on Friday 4-1, and they lost on Saturday 5-1. Sold out crowds at Place Bell on both nights. They had plenty of support from their fans, but boy, Toronto just had their number. It also didn't help that the animosity has ramped up between these two teams so much. The penalties were out of control. There were 50 combined penalty minutes just on Friday night's game. And staying out of the penalty box really needs to be a key for JF Ull's team, particularly against a team like Toronto, who is lethal on the power play. In fact, between the two teams, there were 4 power play goals that were scored in that game and 1 empty netter. So none of those 5 goals scored by either team were scored at even strength. So could they recoup? Could they come back on Saturday afternoon and shake off what had happened Friday night? Well, no. For some reason, Laval came out and looked completely listless on Saturday. They looked like they had no idea what they were doing, completely disorganized, and Toronto took full advantage of that. Laval only managed to muster 12 shots on goal through the first 2 periods. Now, this was the game that Kaskisuo was in net. Admittedly, one of the goals that he let in was probably one that he would like back, but honestly, the defense in front of him was not helping whatsoever. And after the 4th goal against in this game, JF Ull pulled Kaskisuo. Now, the information that we don't have is what caused Kaskisuo's injury. We just know that he is out week to week with a lower body injury. Did it occur during the game? Was that part of the issue? Was that why he was pulled? We don't know. Or is this something that happened outside of the game during warm-ups? We just don't know at this point. So he's out week to week. What does that mean for Laval for the week ahead as they go out on the road again? Well, you're going to want to stick with me till the end of the video where we do set up this week's contests. So fortunately, it is time for us to bring back our favorite guest to the show. That would be none other than Patrick Williams. He is an AHL expert. He is the go-to guy for AHL insight for every team around the league. He not only is the AHL writer for NHL.com, but also a features writer for the AHL as well. And we're always glad to have him here on the show. Patrick, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be back.
So, okay, Casimir Kaskisuo is now out week to week. We know that Strauss-Mann has been recalled from the Trois-Rivières Lions. He did get his first career AHL shutout, ECHL shutout while he was down there. Just played a couple of games though, and got recalled right back to Laval. So, can you give us kind of the broad view of what Kaskisuo's injury, because we don't know how long he's going to be out week to week, what kind of a bind does that put Laval in right now? Or has Dobesh made enough progression in this short amount of time that Kaskisuo was there that he's going to be maybe a little more capable of carrying the load than he was at the beginning of the season?
Well, I guess the first question that popped into my mind was, what does week to week mean, right? I mean, week to
Mhm.
week could mean what, 10 days? It can also mean many weeks, right? Like, does that mean 6 to 8 weeks? So trying to read the tea leaves there between kind of between the lines there, like is difficult. And I will say, at least Laval puts out injury updates and reports, so that's a big step, compared to other teams where players just kind of go off into the ether and we sort of assume they're injured, but don't
Right.
have like a direct official confirmation. I mean, I'm usually able to sort of get that from under the radar, but it's always nice to have the official word. So that's my first question with Kaskisuo, is like, exactly what does week to week mean? And as far as what it means for Laval is, Jakob Doish, come on down, right? Like,
Mhm.
he is taking on a heavy workload, right? Like, he's already at 34 games, which if I'm remembering correctly, that's I think third in the league now in terms of workload. So that's a lot for a young player, a rookie who's just starting out, to get that kind of um, responsibility put upon him. And as
Mhm.
we've discussed before, with a team that certainly has its defensive lapses and misadventures. So it's a busy 34 games too. Compared to maybe what some other goaltenders might face, who are a little bit more of a steady defensive system. So yeah, his workload doesn't look like it's going down anytime soon. That was sort of the whole idea of bringing Kaskisuo into Laval in the first place back in December, was to ease up
Right.
some of that workload, but and it worked for a while, but now Kaskisuo's out, and it's going to be the Dobis show, and maybe we'll see Strauss-Mann pop in there here and there to take a game or two at different points. But yeah, kind of it's Dobis or bust now for Laval.
Well, that's kind of the thing. So I'm going to actually bring up here for us. Let's take a look here at the current standings for Laval. We look here at the center in the North Division, and Laval is still in sixth place. But the difference now this week is this number right here. This 51 points right here, putting them 5 points out of a playoff spot. That fifth position is how you qualify for that best of three play-in round. Um, and they're 5 points out of that, where Toronto and Rochester are tied there. Can you talk just briefly about how, just even in the course in the past week, the landscape in the North Division has really shifted, and Laval and Utica are starting to really find themselves kind of behind the eight ball?
Well, how big does that win last week against Hershey look now, right?
Yeah.
Because if you were going through the schedule a few weeks back, trying to kind of like eyeball, okay, this game is 2 points, this game's a point, this game's no points. I think most people would have had Hershey coming into your building as well, that one we can mark that one down for 0 points. So they managed to get those 2 points. Otherwise, they would be even right there with Utica for last in the division. So that's the first step for them. At least they managed to get that. But yeah, no, they're in a tough bind. Schedule really now for everyone in Crest League really starts to pick up now the last 6 weeks or so of the season, where you're getting some of those 3 and 4 stretches. For a lot of teams across the league, and I mean, and we've discussed this before as well. That with the way the schedule's set up, it's so heavily divisional that you do get some of these big swings, even with even in the era of the shootout and overtime losses. It's still a lead where you don't get those games against the Western Conference where there's not as much of a hit in the standings. Like pretty much everywhere you play now is a divisional game, and Laval is certainly no different in that regard. And then when I looked at that schedule coming up, it's daunting to say the least for the Rocket in terms of what they're going to be facing. They go back to New England now. Kind of almost retrace some of their steps from a couple weeks back.
Well, let's actually talk about that for just a second, because this week, so Kaskisuo, we know he's not going to play this week. If he's week to week, he's definitely not going to be playing this week.
Yeah,
And the Laval Rocket just announced today that Lucas Kandata is also not going to travel this week, not because he's injured, but because apparently he is expecting a new baby at any moment. And so he is not going to travel with the team this week as well. That puts them down another offensive piece of their forward lines. So starting on Wednesday, they go back to Bridgeport, where they just were just a week and a half or so ago. And Bridgeport is languishing at the bottom of the league and somehow managed to end up beating Laval in overtime when they saw them just a couple of weeks ago.
yeah,
So what are, that probably kind of came out of the woodwork a little bit. That should have been maybe an easier win for Laval. However, both teams were on the last leg of a 3-3. Do you expect Bridgeport to come out and be competitive against Laval, considering Laval's absences, or do you think maybe this could be a place where Laval could start the trip off with gaining some footing?
yeah. Bridgeport's a team where every so often they can come and kind of like if you're not ready, if you're maybe overlooking them. I mean, they've beaten Springfield now like 3 times in the past month or so. Springfield's a team that's still certainly holding some playoff hopes. They beat Hershey back in January, so every so often, it's been a pretty bad season. Let's be honest for Bridgeport. They
Mhm.
had a disastrous first 2 months or so, but um, they can surprise you like if you're not ready, and it's a quiet building. You go in there on a Wednesday night, if you're gonna have to generate your own energy, and if you're not ready to go, it can sneak up on you. And so that's the thing for where Bridgeport could be a little scary. Um, and then so yeah, so that's the case for Laval, right? So they beat Hershey last week, but then the game before they go into Bridgeport and they drop a point, right? So it's kind
That's
of like
right.
one step forward, one step back type of thing. So, and like you said, now Condana's out, Kaskisuo's out, they've obviously been dealing with other injuries as well. So it's they better be ready, because you got a 3-4 stretch there. Some of your last division or out of division games of the year, they have Bridgeport coming in later next month, but for the most part, March into April is largely all within the North Division. So, this is a chance now to take some points and start to make up some ground. But it's not going to be an easy stretch by any definition.
So then Friday night, probably the other thing that was surprising when they went on that New England road trip 2 weeks ago, that they lost to the Islanders, but the other surprising thing was that they beat Hartford,
Yeah.
which was also, I mean, it was great for Laval that they came out with the 2 points against Hartford, but I don't think a lot of people were necessarily expecting that because the Wolfpack have been a pretty strong team so far this year. So they go to Hartford again on Friday night. Now, one of the key pieces that was missing for Hartford 2 weeks ago was former Laval captain Alex Belzile. He had been recalled to the New York Rangers the night before. I don't know that if he's going to be back in Hartford for this or not, but if he is, that could change the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, Hartford, they've they were really solid the first half or so of the season. They've run in now into some lineup issues. Riley Nash has been out. They got down to a point where they had to call up three guys from the ECHL. I think two of them were from outside of the Rangers system, even kind of day of a game type thing. So, they're Artem Anisimov was released. Their team, Rempe's up. Brzezinski's been up now. He's up to stay in New York. Like they've definitely had some lineup challenges in Hartford. That's somewhat slowed down their, a little bit the pace of their year, but they're still a very solid club. They can certainly present you a challenge. I mean, I was thinking back to that game against Laval. I was a little surprised how Laval handled them pretty handily, and
Mhm.
but that the problem with beating a team like that is now Wolfpack head coach Steve Smith has that kind of game to circle back to and say, hey, remember last time these guys came in and kind of pushed us around our own building. Well, we better be ready this time. So you're going to get a Hartford team that will certainly be um, ready to go against Laval, and so that game is certainly not going to be an easy one either.
It really is. So Wednesday and Friday are kind of a little bit up in the air as to whether or not they're gonna be repeats of what Laval ended up with 2 weeks ago, or if either of those teams are gonna flip the script. But for me, the real wild card in the weekend is Saturday night's game. They're traveling to Springfield for the first time this season, and Springfield has been kind of middle of the pack for the Atlantic Division,
Mhm.
having some good games, having some not good games, and these 2 teams don't have a ton of history so far this season. What can you tell us about what Laval could be facing in Springfield on Saturday?
Yeah, in some ways, Springfield is kind of the Atlantic Division version of the Rocket. Some nights they look pretty solid, other nights they look really, really bad, right? And that's kind of the Springfield Thunderbirds in a nutshell. Like when Adam Gaudette, is kind of going, like he can carry that team to some extent, offensively. Malcolm Subban is, he can kind of be up and down, but when he's on, he's really on. They're a team that's, they just stumbled the other day against Bridgeport,
Mhm.
and yet they thumped Hershey earlier in the month, right? Like they beat Hartford earlier in the month, so like a couple times actually. So they're a team that certainly can put up points on the board. Um,
Jake
so
Braun is
they're
gonna be suspended for
yes,
that game because 'cause he's got a 2-game suspension from the
yes.
league, so they're gonna be without him on Saturday against
So that
Laval.
certainly takes a big weapon from their lineup. They're a team that's also in a fight for a playoff spot. Very similar in terms of where they are positioning wise. To Laval, they're trying to fight off Lehigh Valley. They're trying to get that sixth spot in the Atlantic. So that's the difference with the Atlantic Division is six teams make it. So I mean, we've certainly been over the playoff system enough times on this show that um, it's a little unconventional, but so they're a team that will certainly be dangerous, and that building can be tough to play in too as well for visiting teams. So it's yeah, the schedule is certainly not going to be an easy one for the Laval Rockets. Another 3-4 deal. At least this time down, they don't have to have that swing over to Wilkes-Barre Stratton and then
That
back. So that's a little bit of a break for them.
That is true. Well, Patrick, anytime that we need some perspective on how Laval is stacking up against anybody else in the rest of the American Hockey League, we know we can count on you. Thanks so much for being here with us again this week.
Well, thank you.
Well, hopefully they can spark something on the road, take some inspiration from a big win that they got in Hartford a couple of weeks ago, and dig deep to find some points because they desperately need them this week. And they've got to get the offense going. In fact, one of their guys who is climbing up the rankings in terms of offense is young defenseman Logan Mailloux. And he's slipped off his perch a little bit when we look at the league-wide statistics, but he is still hanging on to the top spot in some very impressive categories. And if you want to hear more about that and learn where Logan Mailloux has recently been leading the AHL, then you're going to want to watch this video right here, and I'll see you again next time.